Well, welcome everybody, and good evening, and thank you so much for joining us to this first Aquero Lecture of 2025, presented by the ACU School of Allied Health in conjunction with the ENVISAGE program. It's going to be a rich and rewarding hour that we're about to spend together, and you can see the topic which you've joined, the inspiring topic, championing rich and dignified lives. So before we start, as we always should, an acknowledgement to country. So in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples' spiritual and cultural connection to country, and in continuing ACU's commitment to reconciliation, I'd like to commence this webinar by acknowledging the First Peoples and the traditional owners and custodians of the country where ACU campuses are located. We respectfully acknowledge our elders past and present, and remember that they have passed on their wisdom to us in various ways. Let us hold this in trust as we work and serve our communities. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. It's a most appropriate welcome. For those who don't know me, and that's probably the vast bulk of you online tonight, my name's Peter Steer, and I happen to be the Chief Executive at Royal Children's Hospital, but also, perhaps even more relevant tonight, I'm also privileged to be a member of the ACU Senate, and appropriate that I do welcome you and thank you for your presence tonight. Look, without further ado, just to frame tonight, it's most appropriate. This lecture and gathering tonight occurs in the week of the Jubilee of People with Disabilities, the Jubilee year for Pilgrims of Hope within the Catholic Church. And again, it's been quite an extraordinary week, not just for the Church, but for the world, in the passing of Pope Francis. And perhaps we just stop for a very brief moment to acknowledge his passing and just reflect on what his leadership might have meant to each of us individually, perhaps in the context of this evening, our work, and as we've heard so much commentary, his impact on the world. And again, as custom, the faculty patron of the Faculty of Health Sciences at ACU, St Bernadette of Lourdes. We'll start with a very brief prayer, but again, in context. Creator God, bless us as we enable healing and care for many people through the quality education delivered in our faculty. Give us wisdom to discern the fields of research which we best serve the common good, and may the Spirit of St Bernadette encourage and help us to acknowledge that everything good comes from you. Amen. So that we have some extraordinarily talented and committed people this evening to speak with you. Professor Laura Miller, Chief Investigator of the ENVISAGE program, who will start this evening, but pass on to Rose Babbage, a parent researcher in the program, and Janice McRandall, Peter Klein, again, parents and collaborators within the program. So without further ado, just to let you know that the Q&A slot is open for the duration of this seminar this evening, and you can submit your questions at any time. And at the end, there will be time for questions and answers for me to place them very difficultly with the appropriate responder, presenter for tonight. So without further ado, can I just pass on to the very, very capable and inspiring Professor Laura Miller. Over to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and welcome everyone to the Aquero Lecture today, and thank you for having us. I'd just like to acknowledge that whilst there is 4 of us from the ENVISAGE team presenting this evening, we have a large network of multidisciplinary team members across the world, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for their ongoing work and commitment to the program. I would like to introduce you to Rose Babbage, pictured here with her son Eric. Rose is a parent researcher and our lead parent consultant for ENVISAGE. Rose is a support coordinator working with the participants who are accessing the National Disability Insurance Scheme, with a particular focus on supporting people with complex disabilities and their families to lead good lives. Rose and her husband Mel are caregivers to 19-year-old Eric and their younger son Marcus and Eddie the family dog. When I met Rose in 2017, she described herself as just a mum, And her experience was, for the most part, trying to juggle the demands of family life whilst also providing 24-hour care for Eric in the home. But Rose is an expert on her children and family, an expert on raising her child with complex disabilities, an expert on navigating complex systems and advocating for families. Rose has 19 years of knowledge and experience that is crucial to ENVISAGE, and she has changed my life and the lives of families forever. I would also like to introduce you to Janice, Peter and little Leo. Janice and Peter are parent-peer facilitators with the ENVISAGE program, and Janice is also our national parent peer, supporting the training and development of facilitators across Australia. Janice and Peter are also parents and carers to 7-year-old Leo and older children Jessie and Penelope. When I first met Janice and Peter, they were just beginning to navigate the experience of raising a child who was developing differently. They too are experts on their child and family, and after finding out about ENVISAGE, they were empowered to think about what they needed as a family and what needed to change to make their lives together joyful and sustainable. Today we will cover 3 main discussion points which we hope will resonate with you as we reflect on the Jubilee of People with Disabilities. Firstly, I will discuss current perspectives in childhood onset disabilities and integrate contemporary concepts to expand our horizons. Secondly, Rose will introduce you to the ENVISAGE program. And finally, Peter and Janice will share caregiver experiences of childhood onset disability and how ENVISAGE has provided value and hope to families. My next few slides will briefly discuss contemporary perspectives concerning childhood onset disability and the evolving nature of how people in this field are thinking and acting. I invite you to reflect on the impact of these ways of thinking in terms of what we have conventionally seen and done and often still do in professional practice, and contrast that traditional thinking with contemporary concepts that we believe or know impact the families we work with. If you would like to know more about these ideas, I invite you to scan the QR code and access this full paper, which is available free online. Since the 1980s, we have exponentially expanded our ideas about health and well-being and what that means for individuals, families and communities. For all of the 80s and the 90s, the World Health Organization framed disability as a consequence of disease, where impairments led to disability and then led to a person experiencing disadvantage or a handicap. You can see the language was negative and deficit-based. The focus was firmly on fixing the impairment, which would then decrease the handicap. Whilst this fixing approach may work quite well when thinking about an acute health condition, so for example, if I was having a heart attack, I would most certainly want the surgeon to fix the blood supply to my heart using coronary bypass surgery and restore blood flow and heart function. But it doesn't work when applied to childhood onset disability and is certainly considered very outdated thinking, although we do still see this approach still used in professional practice today. By the early 2000s, recognition of the importance of the family unit and the influence of broader social systems in paediatric rehabilitation led to the paradigm shift towards a biopsychosocial model of health and disability, known by many as the ICF, with consideration of the biodirectional influences of personal factors of the child in the context of their whole environment, including their family and their community. This gear shift from a deficit fix the child model to a strengths-based, collaborative and family-centred model moved away from viewing the child as the sole focus of intervention and acknowledged family as the zone of proximal influence, and that development continues for a child and their family throughout their life. And whilst the ICF is helpful, it misses some critical elements, particularly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families and communities. In the past decade, there has been excellent work done by G and colleagues to develop the social and emotional wellbeing framework, which considers additional elements such as connection to community, culture, country, and spirituality. Whilst this model was co-designed for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, we have a lot to learn from this as a holistic framework for health and wellbeing. Around the same time, our colleagues in Canada developed My Favourite Words with the intent of supporting the implementation of the ICF concepts into real-life practice. It encourages personalisation of the ICF elements, which promotes a focus on the unique strengths and support needs for each child and family. The F-Words framework also provides tools and practical applications of these ideas in everyday language as part of daily life. All these models have really expanded our thinking about child and family development and family-centred service. Recent recommendations from the Independent Review of Early Childhood Intervention by the University of Melbourne has recommended the new Early Childhood Intervention framework must take a positive, strengths-based and future-focused stance, seeking to ensure that children with developmental worries, concerns, delays or disability and their families are thriving and are offered realistic hope. This includes building capacity in parents to provide children with environments that support their being, becoming and belonging, not just walking, talking and toileting. Life is not meant to be a checklist of developmental milestones. As health professionals, this challenges us to not only be thinking about the child and family in the here and now, but also their health and well-being into the future. We must seek to ensure children and their families' needs for being, becoming and belonging are met to enable children with developmental concerns or disability to participate meaningfully in their communities. There is significant evidence to support responsive caregiving and secure attachments support child development. But often for caregivers of children with disabilities, responding to children's cues and signals or dancing with their child can be complicated or different to what they were expecting. Children with disabilities may not dance easily, and caregivers frequently report that their parenting and everyday family activities get consumed with multiple therapies within or outside the home. We need to empower caregivers to know that spending time with their child, getting to know their child and parenting their child joyfully is as important as any therapy. And supporting parents to see and to parent their whole child within the context of their family and community is of vital importance for family thriving. Parents and caregivers are the most important people in children's lives, and parents as experts on their child and family needs to be recognised, acknowledged and valued. This does not mean that parents do not need support, resources, information and tools. Absolutely. As health professionals, it is our responsibility to build capacity in parents, to empower them to feel confident and competent, to make decisions for the development and well-being of their child and family that are not only informed by evidence, but also based on their values and cultural beliefs. Childhood onset disability are lifelong conditions, and children grow up and become adults. As such, life course perspectives on health, development, parenting and functioning are essential from the very early years. Unfortunately, the reality for many families is that the dominant traditional thinking and fragmentation of services by age imposes significant challenges on families and young people with a disability. Systems, structures, attitudes, personal and environmental barriers, which are experienced by families from very early years of raising a child with a disability, are real obstacles which prevent people with disabilities fulfilling their human right to live rich and dignified lives. We need to be working collaboratively in partnership with caregivers, service providers and policymakers from the very beginning to be future-focused and to create opportunities for people with disability and their families to participate meaningfully and take their place as valued citizens in their communities.
Thanks, Laura. Those ideas and concepts that you've described really resonate with me as both a parent of a child with a disability and as a parent of a neurotypical child. It seems like common knowledge that children develop in their environments through doing things they enjoy with people that they love, like their family and community. We all have these significant advances in how we understand childhood development and disability, and yet for the most part, outdated thinking persists and outdated assumptions continue to impact the experience of families. These assumptions include the belief that the problem lies with the child or the person with the disability, the implicit, if not direct, expectation to throw all of one's resources into fixing the problem. And additionally, families are hearing messages that promote and prioritise normal function and for children to do things normally, whatever that is. When a developmental concern is identified or a diagnosis is given to a family about their child, those assumptions that I've mentioned really come into play. Either said directly or implied, families tell us that they hear your child has a problem, and consequently, families who naturally want to do the very best for their child feel that they need to search for a solution to the problem at whatever cost. Upon receiving a diagnosis, families may feel a range of different emotions, and high up on the list is an immense surge of protectiveness and love for their child. But of course, there are also difficult feelings that accompany this. For example, anger, why are my child and I facing this situation? Fear, how will I possibly be able to give my child everything that they need? And grief, the loss of an expectation of what parenthood or raising a family looks like. And all of these feelings are valid and they're all okay, but they may also be shame and guilt for having those feelings as well. There is no linear progression moving through and past these feelings, although families often tell us that they feel the weight of expectation that they should get over and get on with being super parents. Throughout this, there is little attention being paid to parents' voices and consideration of the overall family well-being, including that of other children in the family. There is also very little emphasis placed on the child's strengths. And most often, the needs of the whole family often fade into the background, and family development, health, and well-being is overlooked or ignored, even when services claim to be family-centred. So there's no doubt that parenting a child with disabilities comes with complexities, but far too often the source of parents' additional stresses and challenges are imposed by attitudes and attributes of our society. To address this, we needed to change the way people think, feel and talk about child development and disability. Our research team wanted to make a significant and sustained impact at an individual, family, community, organisation and policy level, and so began the work of what we call ENVISAGE. So what's ENVISAGE? Well, ENVISAGE stands for Enabling Visions and Growing Expectations, and it's an evidence-based program which aims to empower caregivers to feel connected, confident, and competent to navigate parenting their child or children with developmental concerns or disability by embracing strengths-based, future-focused ideas. The ENVISAGE team is an international multi-organisational team of researchers, parents, parent caregivers and clinicians. The founding ENVISAGE partnership comprises McMaster University in Canada and the Australian Catholic University, Murdoch Children's Research Institute and the University of Melbourne in Australia. The ENVISAGE program comprises of 5 workshops and they're delivered online or in person with supporting activities that explore topics related to child, caregiver and family development, health and well-being. These small group discussions are co-facilitated by a trained caregiver and a qualified early childhood development professional. This approach models a collaborative caregiver service provider partnership, and it creates a nurturing and authentic environment where participants can connect, engage and learn from each other. To complement the workshops, ENVISAGE provides a wealth of online self-directed learning material, tools and resources. So through creating and having people deliver and take part in these series of workshops, we seek to build a community of empowered parents and caregivers, families, communities and service providers who work together in collaborative partnerships. ENVISAGE is underpinned by a deep and authentic community engagement. We've co-designed and we've evaluated the entire program with the people who would impact the most, caregivers, raising children. And from the very beginning, we committed to partner with families at all stages of research design, implementation, evaluation, and dissemination. And this is known as an integrated knowledge translation approach. And I'm proud to share that I was one of the family partners who got involved with the team from the beginning. I was able to continue to contribute to all of the ENVISAGE programs, and I feel valued that my lived experience and that of other families is treated as valid evidence. There have been so many other voices and co-designers who've contributed along the way who may have been involved in many ways, ranging from attending focus groups, reviewing proposed workshop materials, attending pilot workshops, data analysis, dissemination, and much, much more. The key factor in our approach is really having conversations, building relationships, and supporting people to be involved in as much or as little as they wish to, and that's really the key to all partnerships. So where did we start? Well, we listened to and we had conversations with parents with lived caregiver experience. We ran 2 public forums in Canada and Australia to understand families' issues and concerns better, and we asked them 2 main questions. What would have made the biggest difference in your life early in your experience of raising your child? And what do you wish you knew then that you know now? And parents told us that there's no roadmap to raising a child with developmental concerns or disability. Their lives were full of endless lists of medical appointments and therapy sessions, and often they felt alone and unsupported, and they questioned whether they had done enough or whether they were enough. They also told us that they wished they had more fun in their lives. They spent more time connecting with family and friends and were better supported in their community. They wish they had celebrated their child's strengths and found joy in the little things. And they wish they'd looked to the future with the hope and awe of all the possibilities rather than the fear of the unknown. They wanted good quality information, resources, tools, and connections early in their experience of parenting to support and empower them and their family. Our research initially commenced with the ENVISAGE families during those initial caregiver forums in 2017. However, families very quickly told us that we needed to do more and that it was needed now. So now in 2025, ENVISAGE is a program of research that has got 4 flagship programs. Firstly, ENVISAGE families. Secondly, ENVISAGE First Peoples. We have ENVISAGE service providers, and we have ENVISAGE International. And the aims of all the ENVISAGE programs is to empower caregivers to feel confident and competent in their parenting decisions, to increase their skills and communication with service providers, to be able to make choices informed by contemporary evidence-informed ideas and their parenting values, and to connect with other caregivers to improve parent and family outcomes. So all of our programs follow the same 5 workshop model that was outlined, and it's got evidence and community informed adaptations that are made to ensure that the program is relevant, meaningful, and valuable across all the different iterations. So for each of the 4 ENVISAGE programs, we employ rigorous research methodology, and we move through 5 phases of research, from partnership to co-design of materials, feasibility testing, pilot effectiveness studies, and then we have a large-scale hybrid implementation project with measures of engagement and impact. ENVISAGE is underpinned by values that are reflected in the research methodology, program content, delivery, and in ways of working with others. And these include 1, empowerment of families and people with childhood onset disability or developmental concerns. 2, genuine partnering with family caregivers, service providers, and researchers in co-design. 3, strengths-based perspectives and accessibility for all. 4, capacity building approaches. 5, judgment-free interactions, connection, and inclusions. And 6, truth-telling and rights of First Nations peoples. So aligned with our commitment to First Nations peoples, we developed ENVISAGE ENVISAGE First Peoples program, Australia. And it's a program that was created in partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families, communities, and cultural mentors. It's a future-focused and strengths-based program that aims to empower and support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families and communities with raising children with growing worries to feel strong, be strong, and stay strong. The program is a safe space where culture, community, and identity are acknowledged and valued, and it focuses on strong connections, strong families, and strong communities. We're also expanding globally with ENVISAGE International, and so far we have ENVISAGE in Croatia, and we've just delivered our first program in Vietnamese in Australia. We're also working with community hubs in Australia on translations for Chinese, Arabic, Korean, and Indian families, and that's just the start, so stay tuned. Also, findings from our ENVISAGE Families pilot study led us to develop ENVISAGE for service providers. In parents' view, an adaptation of the ENVISAGE program for service providers was actually needed. And this is because we wanted to be able to ensure that the adoption of these key ideas were also included in clinical practice of service providers. We also wanted to improve the application of family-centred service. And we wanted to strengthen service provider and family communication and engagement. So shared goal settings, expectations, and priorities between the families and the service providers. At the end of December 2022, an ACU-led consortium was awarded $7 million for the delivery of ENVISAGE across Australia. ENVISAGE Families and ENVISAGE First Peoples is now available for free to all families raising children 0 to 8 with developmental concerns and disabilities in Australia. And at the end of January this year, we were awarded a further $5 million to continue our work through to June 2027. And that's recognition of the impactful outcomes ENVISAGE has achieved over the past 3 years, and of which we're very, very proud. Since January 2023, we've partnered with over 30 industry partners in all states and territories and trained over 200 service provider and parent peer facilitators to deliver ENVISAGE within their communities. Two of those parent peer facilitators are Janice and Peter, who are now going to talk to you about their experience.
Thank you, Rose, for that overview of the ENVISAGE program. And I just resonate with basically everything you said. So thank you so much for that. And it's just a helpful reminder of what the ENVISAGE program is about. So yeah, my name is Peter, and I'm a parent peer. It helps to lead the ENVISAGE groups, and I am dad to Leo that you see here on the picture. And being involved with ENVISAGE for me has been such a special experience. And I'm so happy and honored to be a part of it. And it's been a significant journey of growth for me, I would say. So, the framework that we use in ENVISAGE, or one of the frameworks, is being, becoming, and belonging. And we use this framework to talk about children in the family unit and in the larger community. But it's also a framework that applies to parents and caregivers. And I think one of the things that the ENVISAGE program is a space of being, becoming, and belonging for parents themselves and for caregivers themselves. And it gives us a place to figure out who we are. It gives us a place to belong. And it gives us a place to question what are our values around parenting, and to forge more helpful ones. So, and that is what I would say is really the gift that the ENVISAGE program has been for me. In particular, is that it's allowed me to question and shift what are unhelpful and oftentimes implicit and really unknown, like assumptions and ways that we think about being a parent to a child with disabilities, and not only to a child with disabilities. I think Rose touched on this, that so many of the principles of ENVISAGE are just good parenting principles. So yes, it's focused on parenting kids with disabilities or developmental concerns, but I'm also a parent to kids who are developing typically. And what I learned in ENVISAGE and what I talk about in ENVISAGE also applies to that. So it's a wonderful kind of program with lots of applicability. Yeah, but being a parent of a child with disability is challenging in unique ways. Um, and that challenge is made more difficult when there's values, expectations, hopes, assumptions by, communities, institutions, even therapy providers that aren't really adequate to the complex experience of disability. And that kind of compounds and makes more difficult. And what is great about the ENVISAGE program is that it gives parents and caregivers the intentional space to question those unhelpful values and to forge and to articulate different values, values that make space for that complexity, values that aren't scared of that complexity, values that aren't ashamed of that complexity, but that actually make space for it. And one way that I've come to think about what the ENVISAGE program does is that it's really teaching a set of practices of attention. So how do we attend differently? And I like this word attention because it sort of includes intention, like I want to get this thing done, but it also expands out beyond I need to get this thing done to ask the question, what's going on? What is going on in my child's life? What is going on in my life? What is going on in the family life? So it's a broader concept that you could say allows a bit of breathing room. So ENVISAGE is about developing practices of attention. So attention to the uniqueness of every child, and that attending to what a child's development looks like at any moment and all the different factors involved in that. So attention to the child, but also attention to the needs of parents and caregivers. That this is one of the great things about the ENVISAGE program is that it's not just about the child, but about the child in the family and about the needs of the family, and the needs of the parents and caregivers themselves. So it's about how do we attend to that. And then also attention to the larger spaces in which disability occurs and in which caring for disability occurs. So, therapy organizations or just larger social spaces and institutions, and paying attention to what's helpful in those spaces and what's not helpful. So again, just practices of attention is, I think, one way that I've come to think about what the ENVISAGE program is. So, and as I said, that it creates breathing room. And that's another way I would sum up what the ENVISAGE program does. It creates breathing room for carers and parents. And with that breathing room, I think, comes an invitation to live with courage and to live with bravery. So, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And my name's Janice. Hello to you all, and thank you so much for having us. I am mum to Leo, and I often share that I think in my professional life, I've been a very confident, assertive, maybe sometimes bossy person that has been able to navigate my professional world with probably a high level of ease. But like a lot of people, haven't felt the same as a parent always. And I think a lot of parents would reflect on that, haven't always had the same level of confidence or sense of capacity as a parent. But when I had Leo, who was born several months prematurely after a very dramatic labor and C-section, he was rushed straight to the NICU ward and then later the special care. And in the first 24 hours, I guess it was probably the first 36 hours where I could barely walk, there was a nurse in the NICU who yelled at me in front of a room full of people for not being down there with my child and what a terrible parent I was. And I didn't even know I was allowed down there. I'd just been through this traumatic experience. And I often feel like that was the moment that set me up for what were really a very difficult first 3 or 4 years of parenting Leo, where there was that sense of being completely disempowered, completely lacking capacity and no confidence at all. So, it was day and night with my experience of being a professional in the world of, oh my gosh, how do I parent this child? So I often feel like now that I've become an evangelist for ENVISAGE families because I'm so enthusiastic to talk to anyone and everyone about it. And as Laura said at the beginning, have become part of the team working as well in the national team. And I guess I would reflect on everything that's been said tonight by saying the most important element of all of this that we've shared with you today is the evidence that we have of how the ENVISAGE program works, that it improves outcomes for caregivers. So the qualitative feedback, and there's some blurbs on the screen now, but that qualitative feedback speaks of the importance of the meaningful connection with other parents and caregivers. And Peter spoke to that, and Rose, this idea of being in a safe and non-judgmental space with people who can understand, relate to, and offer mutuality during those 5 workshops. And I often say when we're training facilitators, the content is great and important, but that connection is often where the magic happens. But also feedback about these new and more empowering ways to think about disability development and the family unit as a whole. So Peter used that example of being, becoming, and belonging. And these kind of shifts in the way we think about things can be really empowering for parents and caregivers, and certainly have been for me. Also, there's lots of practical tools that are a part of the program that parents give us and caregivers give us feedback on, and tools that can be used with service providers, but also within the family and, education centres, tools that centre the family's values and goals, and they're a really empowering set of tools. And of course, that increased confidence and capacity to put new skills into practice and build on those connections that sustain and bring joy to the family. Going back to that very early feedback from parents and caregivers, we wish there was more joy. How can we start setting that up earlier and more often for families? In our First Peoples program, that feedback has been consistent as well across the qualitative data that we've gathered, but also critically includes this feeling of cultural safety and community building. So it's really validating the importance of that robust co-design that Rose talked about, and the community-driven delivery of successful programs for families, and we see that again and again. When we did our pilot studies in the earlier stages of the research before the hybrid implementation, and they've since been published and we can make them available to you, they showed overall findings of improved sense of empowerment, sense of competence, and well-being. So the analysis of interviews that were conducted resulted in 3 central themes that came through. Why ENVISAGE families is relevant to parents' experience, and lots of feedback about why this really is hitting the mark of what's going on right now and what I need to think about or give attention to. How ENVISAGE families created a space for parents to engage with the ENVISAGE ideas, and that can happen over a long period of time, which I will speak to a little bit more, and also what changed for parents because of their participation in the ENVISAGE program. And one of the key findings in one of the longitudinal studies was around what's happening 12 months on after doing the program. And I can really relate to this because most of us, we might learn a new skill or pick up some new tools, but we still need time to feel comfortable and to try those things out and have a little practice. And so 12 months on, I'm, from first engaging ENVISAGE, I know for myself that some of those skills felt more available to me, like I'm now feeling more confident about having that conversation with the service provider, that maybe we could shift some things, or I'm not quite happy with that, or I'm now feeling like I can speak up in a hospital room among all these doctors who aren't perhaps trying to listen to me right now, or maybe I can address some things in the family that are out of kilter. So the studies are showing that it's not just that impact of the experience in the short term or that sense of connections, which absolutely is there, but also critically the feedback that we're getting that over time it just continues to develop and grow. During our full-scale implementation, we've been in this constant evaluative process. So we do baseline and follow-up surveys. There's a randomised control study happening. We're constantly looking at the data to see how's the program working. Is this a successful intervention? And you will see here that the findings from our baseline and completion surveys consistently show improvements across each of these domains, which is just wonderful. And we're thrilled. So things like family functioning, community participation, so getting involved in things, mental health and well-being of the parent and caregiver, the skills that people feel that they have, confidence, knowledge, engagement. And you've heard us all talk about all those themes. So we're consistently seeing that feedback. And it's important to note that even when we've scaled up here, we've maintained those significant improvements in outcomes. So I am, from my own personal experience and having gone through this journey, I am an evangelist for this program. And I think Peter wants to speak to that too, about how you can, we'd love all of you who've been here this evening with us to support the program too.
Yeah, so what you see on the screen now is just some simple ways that you could support the ENVISAGE program and kind of spread the word. It's just as simple as sharing information with colleagues, referring families to the program, and just putting people in touch with the program in whatever way you can. Like just today, I was texting one of Leo's therapists about a dad's group, a dad's ENVISAGE group that we're running soon, and just saying, I know that you probably have some dads that you're in touch with through the therapy organization. Maybe you could put them in touch with the ENVISAGE program and we love to have them in the group. So just simple things like that. Or if there's particular places in the community, schools, churches, playgroups, et cetera, that you think could host an ENVISAGE program, just having a conversation with them and having a conversation with the folks at ENVISAGE. So just we're so excited about this program, and it's so, I think, beneficial. So in whatever way that you can sort of spread the word and make contacts would be great. And then you can get in contact with, we're on all the socials, on all the things, Facebook, Instagram. So join, follow us, and stay connected with us, and you can get all the information you need.
We're going to finish talking, but we wanted to give the final word to some of the participants from our program. So Laura's going to share a video now, I hope.
I am. I just need to connect the sound. So sorry, I'll just do that right now.
It is coming, and it's a lovely little video. And while she's doing that, you can start putting your questions in the Q&A.
Doing things that make her happy and just enjoying all the little and big moments.
ENVISAGE is really trying to fill that gap in a way that is a rights-based, equitable platform that we can all utilize and connect to. The impact has been immense. It's changed my life in every way.
We now surround ourselves with people that see my daughter's value. I've vowed to work with people that use a strength-based, family-centered approach.
My child is a storybook and not a textbook. In order to understand him, you need to look at his whole story. You need to look at who he is, who's around him, what's involved in his world. And ENVISAGE truly gave me the tools necessary to be able to do so, and the confidence. I'm eternally grateful that I was a part of ENVISAGE, and I highly recommend it to anyone else.
Thank you very much for listening to us this evening, and we really look forward to your questions from the panel members. So over to you, Peter Steer.
Look, thanks, Laura, and congratulations to all of you for a most articulate presentation of your program, and congratulations on your engagement. Again, encourage people to put some questions there in the Q&A, and I'm not quite sure who this is visible to, but I will just repeat the question. And I guess this is, I guess you could start, Laura, on this, but first of all, Michael says, thank you, an inspirational program of work. Everyone will recognise the value of programs like ENVISAGE, but he's interested to know what you've found to be the major barriers to rolling this program out across Australia and internationally. And he's annoying because he's put part 2 as a follow-up. Are you finding these barriers have reduced, increased, or remain much the same as the program has gained traction and profile?
Thanks for that question, Peter, and thank you, Michael. I think we've learnt a lot of lessons from a rapid, large-scale implementation of ENVISAGE. We went from a very small research team to an Australia-wide program within a period of 6 weeks. And so we've had to really think through how do we make the program as accessible to all families across Australia. And part of that has been thinking about how do we get the word out to families and how do we increase awareness of ENVISAGE across the community. So there's an important part about building trust, and people need to hear about ENVISAGE often a few times from people that they trust, whether that be another family member or a clinician, but most often it's from other parents. So that word of mouth referral into the program is a really important part of it. So there's been a lot of work that we've done in terms of increasing the awareness of ENVISAGE in the community and providing we've done hundreds, if not thousands, of presentations over the past 3 years to services and organisations to be able to promote this as a free program available across Australia. We've done a lot of work with service providers, and I think one of the challenges are around some of the complexities that we've talked about already is that, particularly within the current NDIS model, is that there has become a bit more of a disconnect between service providers and families, and so that support to families and those family education and support and wellness programs that used to be part of services have really disappeared or not been highlighted over the last several years. And so to be bringing a program back into families and to encourage families that actually prioritising yourself and upskilling yourself and looking after your own health and well-being is really important. Has been one of the other challenges, because we're obviously working with parents who are very busy with lots of things on their plate, and so making sure that we provide access as in many ways as possible. So we've learned a lot. I think Rose and Janice, do you want to add anything? Janice has been on the cold face of upskilling 200, and Rose in the beginning as well, 200 facilitators across Australia. But what would you like to add to that?
Oh, Janice, do you have something to add? Yeah, no, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, and there has been ups and downs, but for the most part, we've just had such a great team. We've just had so many people that are just so keen, that say that it's really important. The work we're doing is really important, and so many people wanting to get involved and get on board, which has been great. Obviously, logistically, getting it around to the whole of Australia and making all those connections. As connections and partnerships take time, so it's really an evolving process. Yeah.
I mean, that was the only thing I was going to add, Rose, to the second part of Michael's question, is that actually and I'm sure many of you here this evening understand the pressure and then sometimes the disappointment of being in a grant environment when you finally start getting traction in those relationships and the money runs out. One of the great benefits of the renewed funding is that we're really in the last 6 months starting to see a lot of those relationships come to fruition, and it continues to be a challenge to recruit parents and caregivers for a free program that we know works. So that's the environment. It continues to be a challenge, but in many ways it is becoming a lot easier, and we are starting to build reputation and a sense of connection with lots of community partners that want to host our program. So that does excite me about the renewed funding at the end of this grant. I'm sure Laura and Rose feel the same, that we can see we have built a lot of meaningful connections there.
Well, thank you all for that. There's a few other comments, and a question popped up. Wendy's just congratulating you, speaking to her own situation, but just wondering, in fact, she's actually saying personally look forward to participating, so we thank you for that. But Suzanne Chambers, who I think you all know, has obviously congratulated you on your fabulous program, True Person and Family Centred. And Sarah says, ENVISAGE is incredible, so inspiring what you're all doing. If one has a differently able child, how would one connect with ENVISAGE? Is it via referral? Is it connected to NDIS? I think you touched on that at the end, Peter, but do you want to just touch on, again, the connection opportunities and the NDIS link? or
I've
otherwise?
popped a comment. I've replied to that comment. I'm not sure if you can see that, Peter, but what I've done is I've popped a link to our website.
Oh, thank you. Yes,
and yes, no, you don't need an NDIS plan. You don't need to have been accepted to the NDIS. You just have an identified developmental. You don't have to diagnosis or any sort of diagnosis. If you feel that this is something that resonates for you, for your child, and they're between 0 and 8, then you can hop onto our website, find a program near you, and just enroll. Yeah, sign up.
So you don't need to be a resident. You don't need a Medicare card. We're very proud of the accessibility. All you do is self-identify and give us your contact details, and you're so very welcome.
Thank you. You're ahead of the game there, Rose. I should have actually put one more click in there. Look, Belinda's just put up a post as well to, again, acknowledge the phenomenal work you're all doing. She's curious whether or not ENVISAGE has been equally acceptable to all parents' children developing differently. Are there any groups of children parents whose needs are less met?
I can start this conversation, but I will hand over to Janice and Peter, who are actively involved in delivering programs at the moment. When we very first started with ENVISAGE, we asked questions of parents around would they prefer to be in groups with children of the same age, or children with the same developmental concern, or everyone of the same with the same diagnosis. And there was an overwhelming response that actually the diversity of parents and children was really important to sharing and building confidence and connections across those parents. So there was really a lot of positive conversations around how the diversity of parents, whether you had a younger child or an older child, or wherever your child might be in their experience of living with a disability and your experience of raising a child with a disability, that there was value in everyone coming together. We have had some particular organisations that have asked us to come and run a group within their organisation, and that's been useful for building connections within that actual organisation. But overwhelmingly, the program is designed to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to learn and connect, use the materials. And we also have lots of resources online in an online learning platform, so families can go and access additional things that might be more relevant to them or their family in that online setting. But Janice and Peter, do you want to talk about how that plays out in?
I mean, one thing I will say is that we are conscious that, as with most services in the community, those people who are less resourced and find things most inaccessible will have the same experience with us. So we've worked really hard. Some of those things that we've tried to address in our training and creating of space have been around parents and caregivers who are caring for a child who perhaps has a degenerative or life-shortening condition. How do we make this space still a meaningful intervention when we can so easily, slip into the language of all children are always developing. It's just at their own pace, when that actually is not the experience for some families. Or for culturally and linguistically diverse families who find accessibility harder. So that's been a big focus of our project work and community building over the last 12 months. We have parents and caregivers who've been asked by the courts to participate in our program, and how do we make it a meaningful space for those? So I think that it's a really good question, because it points to understanding that usually the people who already have the highest level of accessibility find it easiest to participate in programs like this. So how do we keep all those others always in our mind and always in our planning, so that they can be accessing the program and having that meaningful experience too?
Thanks, Janice. Libby's just, again, commented on the incredible program, but just asking, is there a long waiting list? She's acknowledging the access issue and congratulating you on that. No?
We would love a waiting list, Laura, wouldn't we?
Look at
We would.
actually.
We have, like we said, we've got 30 industry partners across Australia, and we run workshops both online and face-to-face. So anyone across Australia can access any online program. It doesn't have to be a program running with a partner in your state, although some people like to do that so they get the local connections. So there is a lot of programs that are going to be running up until the end of June. So all of those are posted on the website at the moment, and no waiting lists. So I would say one of the things that we're really encouraging families to do, there's a lot of anxiety for parents who are sitting on therapy waiting lists, waiting to see a paediatrician or waiting to see an OT or a speech or a physio. And one of the things we're really encouraging people to do is access the ENVISAGE program during that time. You'll find connection and support and tools and information and resources, and that will really be supportive during that time whilst you're waiting and accessing services. So it's we certainly don't have a waiting list and would welcome as many referrals as possible.
Yeah, and I've popped that into the response, the website address. But I think just wondering how we can make that available to people. We can go back to that slide with all the.
Okay. Yeah.
Can we? Or.
Yep, I can do that. Mm.
I understand this will be available to people who have both able to make it, but those registered. So this will also be available, I think, as well. So.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, the QR code's there as well, so that if people can't see the chat.
Michael has again just put another note up here. Wonder if the panel could speak to he's commenting on the video, touching video, but I wonder if the panel could speak to the changes they have noticed in the children themselves as a consequence of the program.
Do you want to jump in, Peter?
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, it'll be different for every family and different for every child. I suppose, as Janice and I have tried to implement some of the values that we've learned through the ENVISAGE program, I would say probably, what we've noticed in Leo is, one of the things we very intentionally did was try to kind of craft all the therapy that he has, not to try to fit him into a kind of external schedule that we are trying to tick boxes, but to have a kind of schedule of therapy and schedule of sorts that supports the kind of life that we want him to lead, which includes joy, which includes playtime, which includes, connection with family. So I would say, just for him, just like the rhythm of his life, we've tried to craft a rhythm of his life that we feel is a good life for him. One of the things that Janice and I often talk about is, the language of parents as experts on their kids. And there's a lot that we don't know about Leo. He's nonverbal, so we often don't know what he's thinking or sometimes what he's feeling, but we feel that we know how to give him a happy life. We know how to make him feel comfortable. We know how to make him feel seen and loved. And I think the ENVISAGE program has enabled us and empowered us to do that for Leo. So that's one thing I'd say.
And I'm sure and he's got that sense now that, mum and dad, it's sort of the change in you, and we talk about this in the ENVISAGE program, is that if there's a change in the parenting competence and confidence, then there's a change in the child for the benefit of everyone.
As host, if I can just jump in for a minute, Peter, I loved your expression around the concept of attention there, and I certainly something I'll be taking away. I think it's a critical paradigm shift in lots of ways. Can you just reflect, at the risk of going a little bit over time, just on the other children? Because that's one of the things that I would have thought it's an enormous challenge. There is only so much time, let alone energy, that you have as parents. Could you just touch on that? I just appreciate your reflections on that. And Rose, Janice.
You mean like the other children in the family?
Yeah, in the context of time and attention, just to how that balance is juggled. It must be a juggle.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is a juggle. Between all the kind of all the intentional things that we have to do. And I think that's one of the things that the ENVISAGE program stresses is that yes, the intentional things have to be done and are important, but really in a way more important than whatever intentional goals we're trying to set is the kind of attentional space within a family that you try to cultivate. And so yeah, I think that's always the challenge is that amidst all the things that we feel are good and that we have to do, how do we always take that step back, create more breathing space, and pay attention to what's going on in the family? How are the other kids doing? What do they need? How am I doing? What do I need? And it's hard. But I think once you get more into the habit of kind of, entering into that breathing space, surrounding all of your intentions with a kind of generous attention, I think it feels less frantic and less heavy. That's what I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it'd be good to hear what Rose says because she's much further along in the journey than us. But I would just say is the real significant thing that's changed for me over the last 24 months is this feeling like there'll never be balance and that, there's always a juggle and shifting and changing priorities of which child. And I think that's regular parenting anyway. But the big shift is being like, you know what, this is good enough. We're doing good enough. And it's not that sense of what so many parents and carers we're saying that I never feel like I've done enough or I've been good enough. I think that's been the big shift of we're doing good enough here. Yeah.
And I think, and that's what we hear with families is that permission. It's not like we start these individual programs and say, right, you have permission to not send your child to therapy, 5 times a week or whatever. But we sort of have these discussions where people start to realize that, actually, I just thought I had to do as much therapy as I could. And then everything else just had to wait until we kind of sort of fixed or, worked on this issue, right? That's the message that they were getting, a lot of the families. And now they're sort of saying, well, actually, do you reckon it's okay if my other child has a big basketball game that we all have to attend that I can just say no to therapy that week? Oh yes, you can. They and the sort of you see the penny drop of saying, well, actually everyday life and everyday learning experiences and bringing your child to this thing that's important to their sibling is actually really rewarding because you're part of a bigger thing, you're part of a family. And of course we're not, we know that there are all sorts of issues that come into play and logistics sometimes that prevent that from happening, but for the most part we really encourage that and we see that real shift in people's thoughts and feelings. Yeah.
Well, look, thank you for that. We're a couple of minutes over time and it is a Tuesday evening. It's a great spot to finish on. Can I just jump back to Janice's last comment and say this has hardly been good enough. It's been extraordinary. It's been fantastic, seriously. So it's been thoughtful, inspiring. You're all wonderfully articulate and your energy is genuinely contagious. Congratulations to all of you. I think the program is fantastic and the program's very lucky to have all of you. Laura, congratulations and thank you all for attending. And I guess we'll just be asking those who have been able to attend to spread the word. And we've certainly been in contact with those who registered but couldn't quite make it this evening. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.